Welcome back to Demand Utopia, a podcast from Solarpunk Magazine about the futures we deserve, the systems that make them possible, and the stories we tell when we refuse to accept collapse as inevitable. I'm your host, Justine Norton-Kertson. A quick reminder before we get started, don't forget to check out our website, solarpunkmagazine.com. That's where you can buy issues of the magazine, learn about our author submission guidelines, read our blog, and learn more about us. You can also join us on Patreon, where you can subscribe to the magazine and get both magazine and podcast bonus content. All right, let's get started. Today, I want to talk about power outages, not just in the abstract, not as an inconvenience or the annoying moment when the lights flicker, the Wi-Fi drops, the fridge starts warming up, or when everyone starts reaching for a flashlight. I want to talk about power outages as a matter of life and death, because for millions of people, electricity isn't just a utility. It's not just a comfort, convenience. It's not just productivity or entertainment. Electricity is what keeps a ventilator running and powers an oxygen concentrator. It charges a motorized wheelchair. It keeps medications refrigerated and runs dialysis equipment, feeding pumps, CPAP machines, communication devices, stair lifts, hospital beds, suction machines, monitors, and more. For many people, backup power isn't preparedness. It's literally life support. A commentary published this week in the Invading Sea makes exactly this point. As climate change makes blackouts longer and more frequent, cities and states need better systems for identifying and supporting people who rely on powered medical devices. The piece notes that most home medical devices only have backup batteries that last about 3 to 8 hours, while more than half of U.S. counties experienced at least one power outage lasting more than 8 hours between 2018 and 2021. It also says outages became more frequent and longer between 2014 and 2023, driven by severe weather, winter storms, hurricanes, and wildfires. And that's the news hook. But the Solarpunk question is bigger. What would we build if we understood the electric grid as a care system? Because that's what it is. The grid isn't just infrastructure. It's not just wires, substations, power generation and distribution, maintenance, monthly bills. The grid's part of the hidden architecture of survival. It's one of the systems that determines who gets to live safely at home, who has mobility, who has communication, who can breathe, who can sleep, who can keep insulin cold, who can remain independent, and who's forced into crisis when the weather turns. And that means a power outage is never just a technical failure. It's social exposure. It reveals who was protected by the system and who's merely tolerated by it. And that distinction's really important because too often resilience is talked about in vague, heroic, individualistic language. Be prepared, have supplies, buy a generator, keep batteries charged, make a go bag, have a plan, take personal responsibility. And sure, personal preparedness can matter. It can be important. I'm not dismissing it. Flashlights are important. Having your phone charged is important. Backup batteries. A neighbor with a generator can be a big deal. But we have to be very careful when preparedness becomes another way of privatizing survival, right? Not everyone can buy a generator or store fuel. Not everyone can safely operate backup equipment. Not everyone can lift, carry, drive, evacuate, or relocate. Not everyone has a home that can accommodate solar panels. Not everyone owns their own roof or has the money for batteries. Not everyone can leave, just up and leave when evacuation orders come. Not everyone has family nearby or even a car. Not everyone can spend hundreds or thousands of dollars to survive a grid failure they didn't cause. So when we tell people to prepare individually for climate chaos without building collective systems of support, what we're really saying is your survival depends on your private resources. That's not resilience. It's certainly not community resilience. That's abandonment with a checklist. A solarpunk approach has to begin somewhere else. It has to begin with the idea that survival shouldn't be means-tested by disaster. The people most at risk during outages shouldn't be invisible until the lights go out. They shouldn't have to call a hotline during a crisis and hope someone answers. They shouldn't have to rely on luck, charity, or whether a neighbor happens to know they need help. They certainly shouldn't be treated as edge cases in emergency planning. They should be central to the design of the system. Let me say that again. They should be central to the design of the system. This is where disability justice becomes essential to climate justice, because climate change isn't experienced equally. A heat wave isn't the same event for everyone, and neither is a blackout or wildfire smoke or a flood. A broken elevator isn't the same for everyone, and shelter in place doesn't mean the same thing for everyone. Neither does evacuate now. Disability justice teaches us that vulnerability isn't only located in bodies. It's produced by environments, policies, assumptions, and systems that refuse to account for human difference. And the problem isn't that someone uses an oxygen concentrator. The problem is a society that allows the power to fail without a reliable public system for keeping that person alive. The problem isn't that someone uses a wheelchair, it's an evacuation plan that assumes everyone can walk downstairs, drive away, or sleep on a cot in a gym. The problem isn't that someone needs refrigerated medication. The problem is an emergency system that treats refrigeration as personal responsibility instead of a public health necessity. And that shift is crucial, because once we see the grid as a care system, our imagination changes. We stop asking only, how do we restore power as fast as possible? We also ask, who loses life-sustaining support first? We stop asking only, how do we make infrastructure more resilient? We also ask, resilient for whom? We stop asking only, how do we protect critical facilities? And we also ask, why do we define hospitals as critical, but not the homes where people are receiving hospital-level care every day? That last question's especially important. A generation ago, many people who depended on complex medical equipment might have spent more time in institutional settings. Today, many people live at home with powered devices, home health support, remote monitoring, and family caregiving. That's often a good thing. Home can mean autonomy, dignity, comfort, community, and self-determination. But it also means the boundary between home and healthcare facility has blurred. Our infrastructure hasn't caught up. If someone's bedroom contains equipment that keeps them alive, then their home is part of the healthcare system. If the power goes out there, that outage isn't merely residential. It's a medical emergency waiting to happen. That brings us to the part of the episode where we ask what a solarpunk response looks like. First, it would start with knowing who needs help before the crisis. That means voluntary, privacy-protective medical device registries that allow people to identify themselves as needing power support during outages. These registries have to be designed carefully, and people shouldn't be surveilled, stigmatized, or forced to disclose more than necessary. But emergency responders, utilities companies, the local governments need ways to prioritize outreach, wellness checks, transport, and backup power for people whose lives depend on electricity. Second, it would mean community resilience hubs, not vague, quote, resilience as branding, but actual places where people can go during outages, heat waves, and smoke events, and floods, and other climate disruptions. Places like libraries, schools, community centers, clinics, fire stations, churches, public buildings. These can become resilience hubs if they have solar plus storage, clean air filtration, refrigeration, accessible bathrooms, backup communication, and trained staff. All of these things. Transportation coordinated, space for people with medical needs. A resilience hub shouldn't just be a room with folding chairs and bottled water. It should be care infrastructure. It should be accessible by design. That means wheelchair access, backup power, quiet areas, medical charging stations, refrigeration, language access, staff who understand disability needs, space for caregivers, space for service animals, clear communication before, during, and after disasters. Third, It would mean battery libraries. This is one of those wonderfully practical ideas that feels very solarpunk because it's simple, mutualistic, and infrastructure-minded. Just as libraries lend books, tools, seeds, laptops, and Wi-Fi hotspots, communities could lend portable batteries, solar chargers, and backup power devices to people who need them. Some people may only need backup power seasonally, during hurricane season or wildfire season or summer heat waves. Some may need it while waiting for a permanent installation. Maybe some people need it because they rent, they move often, or they can't afford private equipment. A public battery library could be managed through other libraries, through health departments, disability organizations, mutual aid groups, or community resilience hubs. Fourth, it would mean microgrids. A microgrid is a local energy system that can be disconnected from the larger grid and keep operating during an outage. In a solarpunk framework, microgrids shouldn't be luxury amenities for wealthy enclaves and gated communities. They should serve public housing, clinics, cooling centers, schools, community kitchens, elder housing, disability communities, and neighborhoods most likely to lose power. A microgrid can turn a fragile building into a refuge. It can keep elevators running, medications cold. It can keep phones charged, medical devices powered. It can keep air filtration going during smoke events. It can keep people from being forced into dangerous evacuations. But again, ownership matters. A privately owned microgrid that only protects a gated development isn't solarpunk. A community-governed microgrid that keeps a public housing complex or a clinic in a resilience hub powered during an outage is much closer. Fifth, it would mean utility accountability. Utilities know a lot. They know where outages happen. They know which neighborhoods have weak infrastructure. They know restoration timelines, who's behind on bills. Some utilities already have medical baseline or medical priority programs, but those systems are often incomplete, poorly communicated, or limited in what they can actually guarantee people. A care-centered grid would require utilities to communicate with public health agencies and disability advocates, with emergency managers and community organizations. It would treat prolonged outages not as service interruptions, but as public health events, and it would ask hard questions about profit. If utilities can pay executives, shareholders, and consultants, but can't protect medically vulnerable customers during climate-driven outages, something is deeply wrong with the structure of that system. This is where solarpunk has to resist a purely technological answer. Solar panels are great, batteries are useful, microgrids are powerful, but technology alone doesn't create justice. A battery can be privately hoarded or publicly shared. A solar installation can power a luxury development or a neighborhood clinic. A registry can protect people or expose them. And a resilience hub can be accessible or just performative. The question isn't only what technology do we build. The question is who governs it, who pays for it, who has access to it, and whose survival is treated as non-negotiable. That's the political core of this episode, because climate resilience is often marketed as an individual lifestyle. Buy the kit, buy the battery, buy the generator, buy the off-grid system, buy the emergency food and the rugged vehicle, buy the private escape. Solarpunk resilience isn't private escape. Solarpunk resilience is public belonging. It says, when the lights go out, we don't leave each other alone in the dark. It says the measure of a resilient community isn't how well the wealthiest can isolate themselves from collapse. It's how well the community protects the people who are most likely to be harmed first. And it says preparedness shouldn't be a consumer category. It should be a civic responsibility. And this is a key point because the climate future's already here. Blackouts aren't rare anomalies. Heat waves are becoming more dangerous. Wildfires are reshaping the air. Storms are intensifying. Grids are aging. Demand is rising. And the people who will be told to be prepared are often the people with the fewest resources to do so. So we have a choice. We can keep treating outages as temporary inconveniences in a system that mostly works for mostly normal people, Or we can admit that, quote, normal was always a dangerous fiction. People have bodies. Bodies need different things. Some bodies need refrigerated medicine. Some need powered breathing support. Some need mobility devices. Some bodies need cooling. Some need communication aids, elevators. Some need caregivers who can also survive the disaster. A human society designs for that, and a solarpunk society would go even further. It wouldn't treat disability access as an add-on to emergency planning. It would treat disability knowledge as central to designing better systems for everyone. Because when you design a grid around care, everyone benefits. A resilience hub that can support medical devices can also charge phones, refrigerate food, and provide cooling for everyone. A microgrid that keeps an elder housing complex powered can also stabilize the neighborhood. A battery library that helps disabled residents can also help families during outages. Accessible evacuation planning helps parents with strollers, injured people, elders, and anyone without a car. Clear emergency communication helps everyone. This is the deep wisdom of disability justice. Designing for the people most often excluded creates systems that are better for the whole community. So maybe the slogan for today is simple. The grid is a care system. And once we say that, a lot follows. A blackout isn't just a failure of electricity, it's a failure of care. A utility bill isn't just a private expense, it's access to survival. A battery isn't just a gadget, it can be a public health tool. A library isn't just a place for books, it can be a resilience hub. A clinic isn't just a medical building, it can be an energy anchor. A neighborhood isn't just a collection of private homes, it can be a network of mutual support. And climate adaptation isn't just seawalls, hardening, emergency alerts, and infrastructure upgrades. It's the moral work of deciding that no one should be disposable when systems fail. And that's the solarpunk lesson. We don't prepare for climate disruption by becoming isolated survivalists with better gear than anyone else. We prepare by building communities where survival is shared. We prepare by making sure the person with the oxygen concentrator has backup power before the storm arrives. We prepare by making sure the elder in the overheated apartment has somewhere to go. We prepare by making sure the wheelchair user on the 10th floor isn't trapped when the elevator stops. We prepare by making sure the insulin stays cold. We prepare by making sure emergency plans are written with disabled people, not just about them. We prepare by making sure care workers, neighbors, libraries, clinics, transit agencies, utilities, and public officials are connected to each other before the crisis. And we prepare by building a world where the first question in a blackout isn't, who can afford to save themselves? No, the first question should be, who needs us most, and how do we reach them? That's the difference between disaster capitalism and climate solidarity, between resilience as branding and resilience as care. And that's the difference between a future where the vulnerable are abandoned and a future worthy of the word solarpunk. Thanks for joining us for this latest episode of Demand Utopia from Solarpunk Magazine. Don't forget to check out our website, check out our Patreon, and remember, the grid isn't just wires. The grid is breath, medicine, mobility, communication, shelter, refrigeration, and care. The grid is a promise. And if we're serious about building a livable future, that promise has to include everyone.